Hello and welcome to the Snow Badger Initiative. Today we'll be taking a look at Ender's Game, a recent movie that just came out. And I'll be your host, the film curator.
You will be the one to save mankind.
The first thing that I need to talk about this movie isn't actually about the movie itself. It's about the book that the movie is based on and how I'm going to be completely ignoring that. It's not because I disliked the book, I actually enjoyed the book. I even enjoyed the second one, though it got kind of weird after that. But that's just my personal opinion, and you're not here to listen to my personal opinion about books, but rather movies. And the reason why I'm going to ignore the book is because the movie needs to be able to stand on its own. And as well, you're allowed your own interpretation and takes on the material that's presented in the book. So in this case, ignore completely the book. I'm just focusing on the movie. And to be fair, I think that's the best option all along. For any movie that's based off of a book, or any book that's based off of a movie, because they are their own takes. You shouldn't need supplemental information to enjoy your movie, nor your book.
Here we go.
I've never seen anyone do that.
With that long and boring disclaimer out of the way, we move to the next disclaimer, which is in fact shorter. This is not a spoiler-free review. That means that there are in fact spoilers, because in order to be fair to the movie and to be able to talk about everything the movie does, I do in fact have to talk about everything the movie does. So if you don't want spoilers, I would advise skipping this review. But that being said, let's go ahead and look at the plot.
They nearly destroyed us. They will be back.
The story centers around the title character of Ender, unsurprisingly. However, much like the title of the movie though, there doesn't appear to be any other real characters. The closest thing we get to one is in Colonel Grant, played by Harrison Ford, who, midway through the movie, kind of realized that the movie wasn't going to be that great and phoned in all of his performance after a certain point, which is really kind of disappointing because he's quite the good actor. Besides that, most of the other characters rarely are mentioned by their name, and some, like the psychologist assistant to Colonel Grant, simply disappear after the brief scene that they're required to have exposition thrown at them is over. Though, to be fair, in the psychologist's case, they were actually in several scenes, and then just magically disappeared after that and never heard from again. As well as Lieutenant Grant seems to be doing pretty much everything in the military throughout the movie, overseeing a school on Earth.
I've never seen anyone do that.
And after that, Colonel Grant follows Ender to his school in space, where Ender joins a team of other cadets and fights in zero-G battles with sidearms that freeze people, which, admittedly, it does actually do a pretty good job of setting that up, and those scenes are actually fairly well shot. It's just that Lieutenant Grant seems to be doing everything, and that's expounded by on the movie, as well as this segment actually doesn't take up too much time and seems to go by fairly quickly, and that's weird given how much of the promotional material focused on this area in the shooting.
When it's over, what will be left of the boy?
What does it matter if there's nothing left at all?
Then in the last act of the movie, Ender goes to the front line to learn fleet-based tactics from one of Earth's greatest commanders. And of course, Colonel Grant goes with him because the entire military seems to be made up of him and people he knows. Even though he doesn't have much sleep, and they're pushing him very hard, Ender does very well on simulation after simulation, working his way to the enemy homeworld, and on his graduation day, playing the final simulation, he destroys the entire enemy planet, and finds out that he's just committed genocide, because he's actually been leading the fleet in real life, in the movie, as well as in the simulation. He then has a mental breakdown, which is kind of understandable because he's just committed genocides, and runs off on the planet where the forward base is, and uncovers the last Formian, by the way, they're the aliens, Formians, queen egg. And because of this, he has hope that he can start the species anew and that he doesn't actually commit genocide. Here's where it gets a little bit weird. They were communicating to him through a game that he plays on an iPad lookalike, which makes no sense in the movie. That entire game that he plays seems to go nowhere and would have made much more sense in the movie. Remind you, I'm not talking about the books. It would have made a lot more sense for them to be telepathically communicating through his dreams than through a computer app on his iPad. Because of this, the ending seems a little bit forced. It's a different ending than the book, but it still seems forced and a little bit nonsensical. As well as the Formians were never really looked at either. They didn't have much screen time, and you know very little about them. To be fair, part of the movie revolves around Endor getting to know them, but since we, as an audience, don't know them, we have very little interest in them, especially because they don't appear to be a credible threat to humanity. Even though they've showed the footage of the forced Formian attacks several times, it seems more like fear-mongering on the administration's part in the movie on the cadets rather than any actual threat. Because of that, the movie lacks a real antagonist. While several people are antagonistic to our title character and protagonist, no one's ever the antagonist, which really kind of hurts the movie. Now that we've talked about the plot, we can start talking about the review and what I thought about the movie and whether or not it did a good job in executing the plot, themes, and characters that were featured in the film. One of the more minor things that I took issue with the film was that it was set 15 minutes in the future but didn't do this well. While they had a whole bunch of spaceships and other high-tech things, only in one or two scenes were there reminders of the fact that it wasn't too far into the future. On the school on Earth and at the Endor's parents' home, there were issues with just how dated some of the stuff looked. It looked like today's stuff, but compared to all the sci-fi stuff they were using, it felt very out of place. Hey, glad you came. I just got the Pokemon you wanted. Want to trade? Sure, let's do this thing. Basically what I'm saying is, the war didn't jive with itself, and without being able to make the small details in the background be believable, the movie has believability issues in the greater things than it wants us to swallow. However, the more crippling problem that it had was just that it was really confusing, if you haven't read the book. The movie works a little bit if you've read the book, but if you haven't read the book, the movie is just one giant mess. Plot lines are either forgotten or they've ran out of time. Characters just go nowhere. And these things start to add up, unfortunately, and because of that, the movie really does suffer. Now, if you're taking a look at it with the book, if you actually brought the book in the theater, which I must admit I didn't do, though I do own the book and did read it, it still doesn't make a lot of sense. It references stuff in the book, but it doesn't do much with it, and it changes stuff in a way that no longer makes sense with the rest of the changes. And the sum total is just a giant confusing mess. As well as, from a more philosophical point of view, I kind of take issue with the movie's premise because it does kind of stink of the great man, kind of Hegelian theory, and I've always been against that sort of thing. But I admit that is fairly esoteric and most people probably wouldn't care about that.
There's greatness in you, Ender. The world needs you.
And as I've pointed out before, the film lacks an antagonist for us to feel angry at or to direct any sort of emotion to. No one feels to truly be a threat against Endor because every time a threat is presented to him, he beats them so soundly. He's turning into a Gary Sue type character and is kind of meant to be a character insult. Now that being said, the child who played him did play him well. A little bit wooden, but he played him in the wooden that he's meant to be in because he's supposed to be isolated. So he actually does do a pretty good job. Think kind of Mr. Spock from Star Trek. If you're playing him wooden, you're doing it right, but you can play him wooden badly. Admittedly, that's a somewhat confusing statement, so moving on to the rest of the actors. The rest of the actors did kind of poorly. Harrison Ford started well, but realized kind of then the type of movie he was in, and after a certain point, he was really phoning it in. But that being said, he did do a good job on some parts of it, and he is a very good actor overall. He just didn't give his best performance in several scenes, and you can really kind of tell on that. So all that's left now is to give the movie a score. As for the score, I'm going to give it a 3.5. Now keep in mind that I do try to rate movies on a bell curve, like so. Seriously, helpful diagrams are hopefully helpful. So note that it is a bell curve, and it falls into the bad range of movies. It's not terrible, but it's not average or above. And for that reason, I would kind of advise against seeing it unless you really do like the Ender's Game book. And you'll probably need the book to make much sense of the movie, and even then, it doesn't do a very good job of following the book or even reinterpreting the book's themes. It was a bad movie, which is regrettable, but oh well. Till next week then.